Clicking the button.
Cool. Cool.
All right. Weekly Scrap. Number 52. Corley Moore, Firehouse Vigilance. Special guest is Lars Axelsson today. He is the Swedish Firenerd, host of his own web show, a sought-after worldwide instructor. He is an advocate of evidence-based firefighting, and he is officially the owner of the most magnificent beard to ever be on the scrap to date. And it is Lars Axelsson. My pleasure to have you as the guest on Weekly Scrap number 52. Welcome, my brother, from across the Atlantic, in fire anyway. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Corley. I'm glad to be here.
To everyone who joins us live, if you have any questions for Lars or myself, do not hesitate to put them in the chat. It'll be fun to field those questions, throw them at Lars, and to answer those questions. Did I miss anything in the introduction? Anything you would like to add?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. The older I get, I'm not saying I'm very old. I'm still young and vibrant.
Right.
But I do feel like the questioning side of me, like I have a little creed, like challenge everything, and I think that's a big part of me. Like you can describe me also by saying just the guy that just gets, if I don't understand it or don't think it makes sense, I will poke at it until it breaks.
Until it either makes sense, I think, or breaks.
Yes, and that's also me. And that would have been me regardless if I joined the fire service or not. I'd probably be, if I was a street sweeper, I would find the holes in the philosophy of street sweeping
and make them make sense. Well, that's a perfect segue then into my first question to you, which is stolen from the Swedish Firenerd. What was your first impression or first contact with the fire service?
Well, I think I've never thought about it, even though I asked other people the questions. But my first memory was, our cat was up in the tree, and the fire service came up and picked it down. I was very small by then. I mean, it was nothing. It was no connection towards, I want to be a firefighter. I've never had a dream of becoming a firefighter. I wanted to be a truck driver up until I went to high school, which I realized that was not really a future safe job. It's automation and so on, even back then. And then I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going to be an engineer of some sort, and I joined the military service, and I did arms free duty. It's called, or it was called back then when I did it, as an airport firefighter. So I did 10 months as a military service as an airport firefighter.
Right on.
But even after that service, which I enjoyed, but I mean, that was playing video games and working out and just eating and just having, and pretty much just having a good time. I was a very slow airport also, so there was literally nothing to do. But after I went out that was my first. I mean, I was a quote unquote firefighter, but it didn't cross my mind for 1 second that I was going to become a firefighter as a profession. So after that, I went to Norway and got a fish to get some money, and then I applied to become a sea captain. But I never had been on. I've been on a small, rowboat. That was the biggest boat I've probably been to. So I got cold feet. Should I apply to go 4 years to become a sea captain on university, and never been in a boat basically. But then I did my military service. We had joined a program to become a municipally firefighter. A normal firefighter, and I just. 2 days later, I've applied and that was, I joined the academy and that was it. I don't know really why I didn't think about it until then, but it was sort of like you can become a firefighter. never crossed my mind. Maybe that's a good job. And to be fair, I mean, I think one of the biggest reasons I want to be a firefighter was the working schedule.
No, it's hard to knock.
I mean, I hated mornings. I still hate mornings. And becoming a firefighter, you had fewer of them, and you could do night shifts and so on. I mean, that was a big part of it. It had nothing to do with the noble cause of serving the world or anything like that. So that was pretty much the start.
And that's what started you poking and trying to prod and figure out the fire service?
Well, I mean, it started in the academy. When I went to the academy, I started poking a lot of stuff back already there. But I mean, when you don't know anything about a subject, it looks like everybody knows what they're doing. That's good. Like it's the like the veil of ignorance.
That's a very good statement.
Like yeah. If you look at a doctor doing brain surgery, you go like, oh, like the holy shit, that guy is awesome, or that girl is awesome. It's only if you learn more that you know that there's a it's a difference in skill level between brain surgeons. So just like it is with
firefighting, yes.
So the more I learned, the less it made sense. Like a lot of stuff that we were doing. But I was still in the academy. I'd never been out in a real fire truck, never been on a call. It was just like basic training. And I had a lot of thoughts about the training itself, but it wasn't until a couple of years after when I actually started working when I really started paying attention to problems or things I saw that didn't make sense and so on.
Start digging into
yeah, but that wasn't firefighting either. I started with like most of people like rescue, like things which are not important at all. I just want to make that clear. Like rescue, hazmat, EMT, not important at all. Anything that matters is firefighting. Okay.
Dragon slaying, like you said.
Dragon slaying, something that matters. No, but so I was on the dark side when I was interested in like road traffic accidents and stuff like that, rescue. But when I fell down the rabbit hole of firefighting, that's where it became all that I was interested in pursuing. Because frankly, I didn't think the other pieces of the job was that hard.
Right.
The rabbit hole wasn't that deep. I mean, you can spend hours and hours trying to memorize which part of a car that has reinforced metal inserts, or you can just check the app where it says, like there's some extrication guy going like that. I gotta kill this guy. I gotta kill that guy. I gotta kill. but I don't think it is this. So that I just thought firefighting was. And find it fascinating the many things I didn't understand and the inconsistencies I saw and the answers, which was way too specific and clear to be true.
Like
when you look at physics and chemistry and stuff like that, if you give a definitive answer, it's probably not true. I mean, in the sense that it doesn't have gray areas. Like there's nothing that simple, and that's really true about fire. If you think, oh, that's easy, that's just so and so, yeah, you can probably say that, but it's more likely that it is a gray scale, and what you're saying is a gross simplification.
Somewhere along that scale.
And somewhere along that scale, like where does a flashover start and a rollover begin, or whatever like. Those discussion go like there's sure I can simplify it and maybe I can explain what a flashover is, but I still don't know what it is. I have no idea.
Still to this, okay. Well, I'm going to start with some low-hanging fruit, and I want to, before we get into like actual fire science nerd stuff, and say you are my first guest from across the Atlantic. And so
I am honored.
You are, and the first guest with that magnificent beard. So two things, but you also speak across the world, all around the world you speak. And so I would love to hear in your words the differences in the cultures of fire service from different parts of the world that you've been to, and your takeaways, basically. As much, go for it.
Oh, I mean, you can talk about that question for hours, but I don't know if I want some remarks like. One thing is it's because it's people and people are basically the same everywhere you go, and a certain type of person particularly goes to the fire service. So the culture, if you go into the firehouse, pretty much anywhere you go in the world, you feel sort of at home because it's the same feeling. So in that sense, the culture is very similar. Now, are there small culture differences? Absolutely. Like if I go to Japan, it's probably not the same as in United States in sense of how they behave towards each other in terms of cultural, social, like bowing and how they speak, and like in Sweden we don't serve the captains and so on. Like there are of course cultural differences, but if you take away those small rules and things like that, it's sort of the same. everywhere you go in the world, the same fight is between management and firefighters. It's the same problem with, if you're part of the small percentage of firefighters that want to change stuff for whatever reason, whatever way, you have the same battles against anything from morons to your enemies, to the lazy people, all the people that, trying to say that, hey, have you thought about this? Yes, I thought about that. You read it in Fire School 83. You haven't changed your opinion since then. You haven't read anything else. Yes, I thought about that thing you just said.
No, absolutely. It's just so funny because what you're describing is every fire station I've ever been to, or every fire department I've ever been to. So
yes,
definitely. So, go ahead.
So in that sense, like everywhere you go, it's the same. So you can you find you can pick out in the fire station sort of like, oh, I got that person at home, and I got that person at home. It's just a different name. So in that sense, it's the same. But I when it comes to differences, which is maybe the most interesting things, I think there are differences in, like, one thing I find fascinating, interesting. I'm not saying I got an opinion about it really, because it's a dual-sided coin.
Okay,
it's a coin, but in Europe, for instance, in general, firefighters are employed. They apply to a job and they get hired, and they're employed, and they're protected by legislation for employees. It says anything, you shouldn't get hurt and so on. I'm making a broad brush here. Sure, Europe is way more diverse than United States is, and the United States is very diverse. So absolutely, broad strokes here. But America is sworn in. I mean, you get a job as firefighter, but then you swore in, and you take an oath to do certain things, and you're still protected. I mean, you're still protected as an employee. You should have protection gear and so on. But I thought about this, and if I make, so let's take a practical example. If I'm standing outside a building and I'm not 2 in 2 out, and in Sweden, if I go inside anyway, I'm not 2 in 2 out. I make a personal decision. Like, for instance, I arrive sometimes when I go at my volunteer fire stations where I work. I arrive at the scene by myself, and let's say there's some reason I want to go inside, even without a breathing apparatus, or I have one, but just say I take that on and go inside. I'm not 2 in 2 out or equivalent. I can do that in Sweden, and I wouldn't get punished, even though it's against the law. We don't have a punitive system, but it's still something that's, I mean, if the employer would say, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that. I've heard the same in America, and people go inside and they make disciplinary actions. They might get fired and so on. I've never heard about that happening in Sweden or Europe, for that matter. It's just still. Now, the interesting part of that, I think, is in Sweden, you're not supposed to take risks as an employee. It's decided by the guy who you work for. But as an employee, you have always the right to say, I don't want to do it because it feels dangerous.
Okay.
In America, you can't say, I don't want to do that, because you would disobey an order. And that might be, if you're going, black and white,
sure.
might end up in, you disobeyed an order. Why didn't you go in there? And the third aspect of this is, when you swore in, you kind of in America say, I will take whatever risk I feel is necessary to do my job. And in Sweden, it's pretty much laid out what kind of risk you can take and not take. So we have this I would say in America, which I like. Let's formulate it like this: if I were to build my own fire service, I think I would choose and say, like, I could do legislation also. When it comes to this question about culture, I think I would say the employer is have the have the legal requirement to say that we're going to give you training and equipment to take this amount of risk. And as an employer, I can't force you to take more risk. You know, that's I can't do that, because in that case I would have to supply you with more training or more equipment, whatever it might be. I can force you to take this risk, but as an employee, you always have the right to say, I don't want to do that, because I think that's an integral part of safety. Like if some idiot says, hey, go into that fire, and I say no, like I don't want to do that, that's probably because there's something I know, or something I feel, or something that maybe the officer doesn't know. So I think that's an integral part of training. But where I would like to have the option is, if the employer says you should only take this risk, as a person, I should be able to take whatever I risk upon that. If our legislation said, yes, you have to be 2 in, 2 out, but if you feel like it, you can go in anyway. Like, sure, go ahead. But you know, if you die or if you get hurt, you know, it's not the employer's fault. You can't sue the fire department.
Right.
So in Sweden, you can't do that. And in Sweden, it's not free healthcare, but it's socialized healthcare. So I mean, it's not like you don't get healthcare. You can be as stupid as you like. You would still get healthcare. It's part of the problem. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So, but in America, maybe you get sued if you do something like that.
Sure.
Or you don't get you have to pay your own health care bill. You can have massive problems. So culture-wise, I'm to round that up. I don't know how legislation forms culture, but in America, there is at least a niche of American fire service that says we are sworn in, we take more risk than others. We are badass fire dragons, hero slayers. And I like that. I like that individuals should be able to take that, as long as you are actually aware of the risks you're taking. It might just be ignorance that make you go inside. It's not really. To be brave, you have to actually know the dangers.
Know what you're being brave about. Yes.
Yeah, and I would perceive that a lot of firefighters may not understand the dangers they're going into. Vis-a-vis, they're not really brave; they're just ignorant. So the most knowledgeable guy about risk may be the most brave one, but that's another. If they're going doing the same thing. But anyway, so to have that niche, I really like that. And that niche, I don't say that niche that want to take individual risk is very or at all existing in Europe. It's more this is the risk we're going to take. It's mandated from the employer. It's balanced in checks, and you rarely go outside of that bound or even want to. Okay. I would say in general, and I think that comes from a simple thing. I think it's from the process of swearing in.
That one act, you think, makes that big a difference?
Well, it might be a symptom of a culture difference.
Okay.
But I think that is one of the, if it's a chicken and the egg, not really sure, but I think that's a vital piece of it, that I'm sworn in. I'm not just doing a job. It's not a job.
I like that. Now I got to bring this up.
Like that.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I have to say, you don't think it's the helmets?
No, that's just stupidity. No, but I get like everybody. Now, what I don't like about, for instance, Swedish, we have been so, you should. It's basically socialism, but anyway, it's the tall poppy syndrome is called in Australia, for instance. You shouldn't think that you are something. We will knock you down a peg.
Right. Okay.
So being cool in that case is, what do you like? Are you trying to be cool? Step in line. Like nobody should be cool here. Everybody's equal. Everybody's the same. It's the whole layer of that one. So Sweden, it's being frowned upon to be cool, and the problem is that if firefighters are not allowed to be cool, I'm not saying Swedish firefighters aren't cool. per se. Maybe there's still status in society, but being cool is a very important motivator. People want to be cool, and if you feel cool in an American fire helmet, and you feel like a dork in a European one, maybe the I would say the drawbacks of having a very bad design of a fire kit, the helmet, the fire sombreros, as somebody said. And one of my instructors called it a fire sombrero. But maybe it outweighs those drawbacks of people feeling cool, and if you feel cool, maybe you get more motivated to do the job. I don't know, but technically, it's not a great. I have one. I've received one, so I have one in my store, and I take it on when nobody sees me. I look myself in the mirror and wish myself being an American badass fire hero, Dragon Slayer. Yes, but it's not. But it's not a functional piece of kit. It's very hard to make that. And if you want to be, and this is where sometimes I get in trouble when someone say, "Oh, I'm the best firefighter in the world." I meet some American, and they say like, "Well, if you're really dedicated about helping your community, you should have the best piece of kit." And they can't really argue that the American fire helmet is better than. I mean, there's multiple versions of the European, but functionally, generally, they are better. They sit better on your head. They actually stick to your head if you fall down and stuff like that. So I forced them to admit that I would rather look cool than have better gear. And I'm just I'm happy with that. If you want to rather be cool than good, fire on.
Fire on.
But don't be a hypocrite in that case.
Just embrace it, that the leather is cooler.
Just embrace it. Go I rather, like me and a beard, like let's jump to that conversation about having beards in the fire service. Like, okay. I'm very comfortable. I'm very comfortable having a beard because it tied back to that discussion. I'm very comfortable having a beard because when you use an SCBA, you have an overpressure, and beards in the fire service in Sweden has been going on for 20 years. In Norway, I know Austria, Spain. There's a lot of countries that have started or have had beards for many years, allowed beards. Anecdotally, it's not a problem. Technically, it's not a problem. Sure, you might get a leakage, but you might get that without having a beard. When I was beardless, my mask slide around on my face, especially when you shave and I got sweaty and I get a leakage. I adjusted my mask and it was gone. I would say I get less or the same amount of leakage or potential for leakage when I have a beard. Now, so in that sense, I don't care. I'm a badass fire dragon slayer with a beard, and I can perform my job. But if I worked in a very busy station now, and I was obliged to wear a neutral mask, meaning a filter mask, P3, whatever it might be. Sure. If you have that and they're fitted, those are neutral pressure, and they will not work as well with the beard as without. Probably. And so if you want to be able to perform to the limits of your ability without an SCBA with another mask, sure, you would probably have to lose your beard. And that's where I go, I'd rather be cool and have my beard, which my wife likes, and I'll take the 2% performance boost when wearing a particle mask in that situation. So I'm a hypocrite too.
Right on, because you want to look cool. And if you,
I want to look cool.
and a couple things to catch up on. Arjan Bruinstrup said, "Always that cat," and he's talking about your first experience with the fire service, I'm sure. Taylor Quinnell said the most knowledgeable guy about risk may be the most brave, and so he was quoting you there. Sean Coffey said, "What's a guy got to do to get a fire shirt from Sweden?" So there's a question.
Well, you have to know some cool guy from Sweden who will send it for you.
Hannah Elliott.
Now, generally, Sweden do not have a big exchange thing going on with other. It's a work piece of clothes. You don't get extra, so you can't buy like a T-shirt from your department. It's not like many other countries where you buy them and wear them off work. So you would have to take a new one and sort of steal it from the station, or you give away some old, that you already worn. So the system it's not built for spreading your logo everywhere. But it's probably possible, but I don't send t-shirts because I get their request all the time about patches and t-shirt, and I should just say, so no. So
travel to Sweden is the first step, and
marry a Swedish girl, start paying taxes, join the fire service,
grow a magnificent beard, and wear the helmet that's not as cool.
Yeah, then you might get a t-shirt.
Fair enough.
No, but there are people who definitely will send you.
Okay. Howard Reinwald said, "If you look good, you feel good. Feel good, you play good." Oh, and he was quoting Deion Sanders there. So talking back to the helmet.
I mean, again, and I get that. Like, it's part of it. Now, the question is, if you were to change your appearance, and after a couple of years, and you get a new piece of a new look, you would probably feel good in that one too. Like, it's not. I don't think that the helmet defines the American Fire Service as much as the fire service thinks itself, because you look at different departments around the world when they switch, and a couple of years later, that is the norm. It's sort of like it's always been. Like, if you were to go out on the fire engine now with 3/4 boots, people would laugh their asses off. Like, and that was the norm.
Right.
That was the norm. Like, if you can pick that away. And if you think that the status or the coolness or the traditions or anything lies in a piece of headwear, I think you have a problem. Now, again, but if I was the fire chief in the American Fire Service, would I be the one who said, like, I'm going to give you European helmets whether you like it or not? Probably not. It would be so far down my list of things I probably would have liked to change. So maybe 2050 would be the time.
The time frame.
Helmets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't waste your leadership currency on changing them to the motorcycle helmets.
No, fuck no.
Okay, fair enough. Get my notes back.
Sweden, we don't have the European helmets. We have the old German military style helmets. That would be most common in Sweden.
Okay.
We have a very, very neat, like, if you look, almost typical Nazi German soldier.
Yeah, up and down.
That one goes down like that.
Yes.
That's the typical traditional Swedish look. Now that's sort of going away also, but that was the helmet that Swedish fire departments didn't want to change, because that was how a firefighter should look like in Sweden.
That was the cool look in Sweden.
Yeah, that was the cool look in Sweden.
So everybody's got their little micro.
Everybody got this. It's just a different piece of kit. Like, it's surface deep.
I like it. I like it a lot. Evidence-based fire instructor. Talk about your training philosophy and how it's developed. Broad question. I know I'm throwing these big, broad ones. You can knock them whichever direction you want.
Well, I realized early that my experience was not enough for me to understand fire. Like, so what do you do then? I start reading books. And it took me a while, and I would say before I started forming my opinion that it doesn't matter where you work in the world, experience will not make you a good firefighter. Experience is highly flawed. Like, highly flawed. Like, in the microcosmos, experience is good when you know all the factors. Like, if you sit down on a chair and that chair breaks, and then you see another chair and it looks exactly like the first one, you're gonna be like, yeah, my experience tells me that. I wouldn't put my entire weight on that chair before, like, sort of feel it, because you sort of understand how a chair works and you can look at it and so on. You sort of know the factors that playing if that's going to be a safe chair. But a fire ground is highly dynamic, and you're viewed, each individual view it from an extremely limited position. You're looking at a certain part of the building, a certain opening, and certain, smoke coming out, flames coming out, and you do something and something happens. But the reality is you have no idea if what you did made the thing you saw happen, or maybe what you did had nothing to do with that, or maybe did it despite the fact that you did that, and so on. You don't know really what the cause and effect is. Now, the more you learn, the better you might become of trying to guess. But still, if I look at a video of a helmet cam or something, I will have to watch that 10 times to even pick up on all the things you possibly could see, if you just from that vantage point with those senses you have, a thermal imager or maybe, you know, helmet camera. Now, if you look at it in the stress of a moment, how many cues of those are you picking up? A fraction.
In real time.
In real time, you're a fraction, because you have a priority on your mind, and when you have a priority in mind, that's what you focus on. Are you going to stand like, oh, look at that, you know, like velocity and smoke up here, and you look at that, well, where's that smoke going? It's going over there. Maybe that's an exit. Like, you don't have that time. You don't take that time, nor maybe you shouldn't take that time. But that's the thing, you can look at a video, and then for 10 times you look at it, you go like, yeah, that's my inlets, that's my outlets, that's the flow going here, the fire is going in that direction, you know, like it's becoming worse or becoming better. But even if you have that, and even if you took, let's the extreme example, take UL, all the data and all the angles of videos and everything, you still, there's pockets where you go like, after all that data, all the videos, you go like, I don't really know why that happened. Because there's so many factors, and it's so dynamic, it's so fluid, so that you're going to go to fire in a specific building, and there's a specific fire behavior, and you have a specific position, and that will give you some experience that will tell you how a different fire in a different position and a different building type is going to behave. There's very limited amount of value in that. Is mine, and I know I get a lot of.
I can imagine you get a lot of pushback on this, because even my gut is saying, "What's he saying right now?"
Because I mean, there's been a tremendous, I would say, tremendous emphasis on experience. Okay. I describe the fire service as an experience-driven fire service.
Sure,
and that has led us, a lot of departments, a lot of firefighters, highly astray. Now, the opposite of having only,
and I just want to drill into that for just a second. Yeah. Do you think it's because your belief, of course, is that they start the anecdotal that they set through in a certain fire, they're starting to believe that's just that's now reality every time?
Yeah, at least, you know, like if I see pockets of flames above my head, last time, you know, I used my stream up my head and it went away. And you do that twice, and you go like, start building, like, yeah, it works. And then three times it works, and the fourth time nothing happens. You go like, what the fuck? And you're stumbling out the back door, and you go like, my experience does not explain to me what just happened. I just know about 3 out of 4 times it worked beautifully. The fourth time I got my shit kicked.
Right, so 75%, but.
Yeah, what it, like, and if you go only if that was the only thing you understood, you didn't understand anything. Like, fire was magic.
Okay.
Like, you don't really know. Like, you go in and whip your stream, and you know, you try different things, but sometimes it flashes, sometimes it doesn't. That's what you get when you go like, if the extreme route of experience. Now, there's of course a gray area. But let's go to the extreme version of knowledge. Knowledge is when you try to, like, you try to break down all the factors. You go learn basic physics and chemistry and so on. And you try to learn all the factors and how the individual factors work, and then you try to combine the different factors into the highly complex environment, which is a fire. It's, you know, like, there's so much physics going on, it's not even funny. You know, most firefighters became firefighters because they didn't want to deal with physics.
Sure.
But that's what it is. That's what it is. It's just grossly amount of physics going on, and of course chemistry, but physics is maybe, I would argue, the most important one. Now, if you take only book smart, you learn all the physics. You don't have what I would describe as the triggers and to put the right physics and the right time together with the right behavior. Meaning what experience does is it allows you to see, like, I've seen this one before, I've seen this, and together with knowledge about how to break down the variables, at least, you know, in this case, it's very rapid. It's almost intuitive if you understand it. It has to be intuitive if it's going to work. I think the fire is going to go that way, or I think that way, or if I spray my nozzle here, it's going to work. If you don't have that underpinning knowledge and the experience of knowing when it sort of applies, so when you should use it and so on, I think both is going to be highly flawed. Now, I'll take the radical approach. I'd rather have a very book smart firefighter than a very experienced one. Like if I were to do that, which would be the highly difference between sort of 99% of all the firefighters go like, yeah, I'll take this gritty experienced one.
I'll take the old salty dragon slayer over here as opposed to okay. No, but
I want to be clear. But it depends on, of course, how you train. Like if you like. That might go back to like what is properly training and so on, because I would argue that, for instance, like in a typical American fire academy, you would have firefighter 1, firefighter 2, so on. The amount you spend on actual knowledge about fire behavior and suppression has been abysmally low.
Yeah, it's just,
yeah. Which means that you're like, oh, I want to have experienced firefighter because we're good at throwing ladders. We've done that. We're good at cutting hose. We've done that. We're good at moving a hose line. We've done that. We're good at, connecting to a hydrant. We're good at that. I need the experienced firefighters to actually know where the fuck, when they're going to cut a hole, how are you going to, where you've done all the skills, but you didn't spend any time in being book smart about when to do stuff. You sort of relied on the experienced firefighters to go like, yeah, now it's not the time to cut a hole, or now it's the time, and now it's time to flow water. Now it's not the time, because you didn't get that in the academy, basically.
And that's what I was going to ask, was like kind of like Klein's rapid prime decision making model of the Rolodex. Do you just say that just that experience applying the knowledge? Yes, no, maybe so.
Well, I mean, you also again you end up in the gray area. Like you said, if you're trying in the military, like if you do if you're going to be a fighter pilot, now where are you going to train? Are you going to get experience from the simulator, or is that valid as experience, or is that just being book smart? Like, where's the line between being book smart and getting experience? Like, let's just let's just jump in the future. Let's say that VR is becoming, you can't tell the difference between a real fire and one made in the computer. And you go in with the VR goggles and VR headset and spraying water. That's a synthesized experience, but that would be in that realm, they'd be people book smart. It would just be good training. So, I mean, if you go to today, like if your VR is not really not there, but if you go to real good training, if you have good facilities and you have very good videos that give you those visual cues, look at the flames above the head of the firefighter. Look, what are you seeing here? Okay, good. That's the visual cue to start applying water, or that's the visual cue of asking for ventilation. That's the visual cue from get the fuck out of there. Like you're building the visual cues. What do you say? Primary recognition, prime decision making. You're building that Rolodex of things by using videos.
Okay.
But traditionally, if you go back to the black and white part, let's say if you only read, in a book, and the book said, when the fire is hot, you should cool it. That did not give you a Rolodex. It wasn't even close. Even if you were the biggest, baddest, book smartest fire dynamics expert in the world, you didn't get any of that because the technology wasn't even there to give you that synthesized experience. And I would say, if I build a firefighter today, if I would get my hands free, and let's say, which is not true, but let's say magically I am all right about my opinions about firefighting, so I'm not blowing smoke up their asses. I'm actually teaching them, which is not true. I know everyone is flawed, but I'm less flawed than others.
There you go. I like it.
Even the sun has spots. No, but like if you build up a very good training, if you have very good facilities for doing live fire training and for fire attack training, and you have very good videos from created and maybe animated and so on to describe all those visual cues, I would say you can build better firefighters without a doubt than having the average American or European firefighter working for 10 years going to what's the average amount of fires for a firefighter? Sure. Actually, for instance, at the nozzle,
more than a room in contents per year.
Yeah, more than one a year, probably not. That's like then we're at, you know, the lucky few that work in a very highly
combustible
prone to fire area.
Yeah.
Yes. Easy combustible area. So I mean, I would take the book smart any day in that sense if you get good training.
Especially when you define
now,
those book smarts
like,
in that manner. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, if you were to say, would I be happy having a Ray McCormack at the training academy that goes to that video, go like, yeah, I've been to that kind of fire, saw this happened. Does it give credibility? Absolutely. Does it give a real sense of this is you know what it is? Does it give a validation for what, you know, whatever it is? You know, there's huge benefits in experience. That's not my point. But I like to draw things to an edge, and like if I were to choose, I would choose Booksmart.
Okay. Okay. Taylor Quinnell said, "We are okay at task level requirements, but grossly inadequate as a fire service about understanding fire behavior."
Well, welcome to the world.
No doubt about it.
There's well, I think that what I think is important to follow up on that one is I think that's a worldwide problem. So fire dynamics training started in books, of course, and then for instance you got into containers and burn buildings, and that's a huge problem right there. I mean, it is the best we had, it's the best we understood, that it has some value and so on, but it's highly problematic because of many misleadings you get from fire behavior in those buildings. But let's say we had better facilities and we were to fill firefighters into better buildings with better instructors that actually taught them better about fire behavior. We would still have the problem that we're dealing with at the task level. We rarely have facilities and trainings where the officers maybe on the outside, or if they're inside, and the strategic command standing on the outside, and they get also to participate in reading the signs of the fire, where the inlets and outlets are, and strategically deploying troops here and there and there and there. That sort of doesn't exist in the world.
No,
I mean, it's on a firefighter level, on a task level, fire dynamics training is getting better, or I think it's getting better. But we have a long way to go to implement it like I said, on the department level, with strategy and tactics being dictated on fire behavior.
Right on. Let me get my notes. I like that one. We actually touched on a lot of stuff we was going to talk about too.
Yeah.
Book smarts versus the way we train Class A fires and Type 1 construction and burn buildings and stuff like that, and the pitfalls and downfalls. Like you said, just trying to include command on the outside, making the same reads and translating those into the tasks for the crews that they're assigning. That's a tough nut to crack as far as how do you try to get to that point where you can do that kind of training. What kind of vision do you need, and what kind of facilities do you need?
I think the first one is, I mean, most departments haven't reached to the point where they actually understand that that's a problem. And even if they understand the problem, like in Sweden, it's typically, and I see that that's the same culture all over the world, it's typically that you have the most amount of training per year as a firefighter, then you get a little bit less as a captain, then you get basically nothing as a battalion chief. You're sort of just expected to know your job, which is not true. It's like highly not true. It's ridiculously not true. But that's sort of how it looks. So even though that I think that a lot of departments realize that we have a huge deficiency in officer training when it comes to that part, like reading a building from the outside and looking at how do I set my strategy and tactics for this event. So that's the first step. And even if you start recognizing, okay, we need this, we're going to do it. Like how you do it. And Sweden, I think has come a long way, even though it's abysmal at a lot of places. It's just, but anyway, I think Sweden has taken it most sense further than most countries, in the sense that we've started to build training buildings are not built just to be a shell for firefighters to move into. They're built with, like you can have propane flames kind of shooting out a window. I mean, that's just a propane flame. On the inside, it doesn't look anything, but you're not, when you arrive to the fire, you're not interested in what it looks like on the inside. You're interested in what it looks on the outside. And you want that visual trigger being, you got flames rolling out of the window on the second floor. If it's a closed window, you look with your tick, and you have, you know, electric heating around the window frame. So you look with your tick and see, why is one window frame hotter than the other one? Well, that might be a cue that the fire is in that bedroom or whatever it might be. So you have to build in, and cheating is the best way. You don't have to do like carbonaceous fire to do a lot of those things. You do it, like propane is a very good tool for certain things. It's horrible for interior training. Like, it's beyond horrible. But for a lot of things of creating triggers, it could be a very, very, very valuable tool like that. And so you have to build the fire, the training ground, not looking at just from the inside out, just looking from the outside in. How do we make the fire look, or at least resemble what fires look like on the outside? So when I think about designing a fire prop, it is all those things. How can we do transitional attacks? I know that's a hot topic. How do you do transitional attacks? How do you do, like the PPA? How do you do reading fire from the outside? How do you do piercing nozzle attacks and different kinds and so on? And if you don't like incorporate things like that, which are, I would say, integral part of a whole fire operation, the inside attack, the inside fire attack, the inside search and rescue, that's just two parts. That's just, you could argue that they're important parts or not important parts, depending on the situation, but it's just two parts. And I think with Sweden, we try to describe it as, we have to move from only practicing inside fire attack, inside fire operations, to firefighting, which is a much broader thing. It's the whole thing about reading the building, reading the fire, deploying troops. What do you do from the outside? How do you coordinate that with the inside? Just take that. How many officers in the world have been able to, even though they've realized that transitional attack, whether you like it or not, at least sometimes is a viable tool.
Sure.
Like, even if you like you're alone at the scene and you can't even go in, like, it's sometimes a viable tool. How many officers have had a training? How do you coordinate that with, for instance, another crew arriving? Like, have you trained on that? Are you gonna continue doing that while the other ones dress up and go inside? When are you gonna switch? Gonna do that simultaneously? You do it simultaneously. What dangers are there about opposing host streams? You can talk about that too. But what are dangers here? And when should one quit and when should another one quit? How do you communicate? There's like literally, I guess, 0.5% of officers in the world have done any practical training in that.
Oh, yeah, you're spot on.
Of course, we're gonna suck at coordination if you never practice it. Of course, you're gonna suck at communication if the only thing you've done is basically rehearsing the standard interior fire attack, which we basically, the fire service been doing for 100 years, 50 years at least.
And at best, I mean, you're doing a single company drill usually when you do it. Sometimes multi-company drills if you're lucky. Yeah. And I think it's a low percentage that gets to do multi-company drills, actually using radios to communicate, or even involving the dispatch system.
Yeah.
And so it's definite. Interesting.
And so going back to facilities, I think that it's a hugely important thing, that when you start looking at that, how do you, and then you have the technical design. How do you design things to get hot from the outside, like visually hot or thermally hot? How do you design, flames shooting out a window? How do you design smoke coming out of a window, a certain speed of velocity? How do you design things to last? Because sometimes you build the facility so that it will withstand fire, but it soaks up so much energy so that you don't get any fire anyway.
No, the fire is so destructive. But if you build something to withstand it, it's worthless for training. So
yeah. So then you go like, you have to insulate it. But insulating, I work with a French company that does insulation, and there's other ones doing it too. But just high temperature insulation to make sure that you maintain the heat that you're creating to be used for the fire behavior, not just be sucked up by the building, and still make sure that the thermal insulation doesn't degrade or break down when you use water and so on. That's like spear science here to make that, because making sure that it withstands the mechanical stress and the heat stress and the cooling stress. It's just it's just complicated. So you have to be very smart when you're designing the facility. If you think that you could just smack up a concrete building with some burn cribs and that facility is gonna do all those things, it won't. It just can't. Now, I would, before I end there, I would still have a very sucky facility and a good instructor than the opposite.
Okay.
Like it's still like software is still way more important than hardware.
Okay.
But of course, software and if you have bad hardware, meaning a poor facility and a typical container or burn building without any insulation and so on. If you have a poor burn building and you have instructors that have been working there for 10 years, they will be heavily damaged by the facility. They will react to whatever the building do, not trying to simulate whatever the fire would do in the real life.
So called like training scars from the actual.
Yeah, massive training scars. And they will, of course, inflict that on anyone they train. They would go, look at that, what's happening here. In that case, you see here, you do that. Well, that's only true in the training building. It doesn't work in reality, maybe. Do you know the difference? If there is a difference, how do you simulate in the training building what would have happened in real life? Oh, you put a fan on over there and you put a hole in the roof and everything but better. Are you sure that would happen in real life in that sense? Or is that only true if you have 14 pallets in a stack?
Gotcha.
And how many instructors are capable of saying like, okay, holy shit, stop. You can't do that because that's going to work awesome. That stream behavior, whatever it might be. In reality, it's going to suck. Wow. So you have to back out. You have to back out and do it over again. You have to behave in the sense that the real fire would behave, not the way that fire behaves in training building. And that's where you have the software problem, because most instructors have never, ever given enough knowledge or experience in training and so on to deal with that. So they will go in and set a fire, and the students will react to that fire. And that might be a recipe for a disaster.
Wow. It's a lot to think about, especially the designing of it. And like you said, there's so many moving parts. It's just, it'll kind of start hurting your brain.
But it goes past physics and chemistry. If you don't know physics and chemistry and then you're trying to design a fire, and if you're trying to design a fire facility, you're going to fail. It's just simple as that. If you think, I'm going to put a place to put a hole here, and a place to do vertical ventilation here, and I'm going to put that's the easy part. That's super easy. That's just how are you going to practice tactical things? Are you sure the fire behavior when it popped that roof is going to be exactly as it would be in reality? How do you design a facility that does that? Or how do you design a facility that simulates, meaning it looks like it would be in reality, but you're doing it in combination with, for instance, carbonaceous and propane, because you want to have flames rolling in the hallway, which you can't get from a crib fire down in one room. Now you supplement that carbonaceous smoke coming down the hallway with propane, and you shoot a jet flame in the hallway, and you simulate that rolling fire coming the hallway, and people start using water or whatever.
Okay. Which takes me right to my next thing, because you mentioned it, which is another tool, and it's the tool in the toolbox, which you talked about in your things I wish I knew when I went to my first fire. Someone asked you a question, and I loved your answer, so I'm just going to throw it at you, the tool in the toolbox, and how you feel about that statement.
Well, when I started, the tool in toolbox was something positive, at least. That was for sure. And I think still is for a lot of people, because the tool in toolbox, it sounds great. Like if I have more tools, I have more options. If I have more options, I can be more optimal. Like if I'm renovating my house, if I just have one type of saw, I can only cut in one way. But if I have 14 saws, I can cut in all kinds of shapes. And if I'm good, I can make a better outcome. I can choose a more appropriate saw and get a cleaner cut, whatever it might be. The same with firefighting. If I have 1,000 options and I know all the options in and out, and I know all the factors of the fire, I can make a more optimal decision if I have endless amount of time to analyze.
Which we always do, of course.
Of course we always do. We just arrive earlier if we're better.
Nothing is time compressed.
No. So the first one, like you said, we don't have an infinite amount of time to analyze. We have a very, very small amount to analyze. I mean, the more you know, it's the analysis paralysis, which is to create. And the more options you create in your head, the more you think it's time you need to analysis. Or the more time you spend on the analysis, the more the changes in the situation, you know, it's dynamic, and you get stuck in your analysis process because the factors constantly change. So that's not an option. You can't do that. You can do that for long, like when you, I would say this, the different part, but Sweden top senior officers have a very loose way of doing command. It's very like get together in group and discuss what the best option is. That's very suitable for later on in the incident when it's complicated, but the time scale is a lot, you know, it doesn't move as fast. When you arrive to a fire, time moves very fast. Like if you're not go in you know 20-30 seconds, you've done something wrong. Like so you don't have that time. Now again, if you learn more and more and more, and that's a perfect reflection also. The more I learned, I would say the worse of a first arriving officer I became. Because it's hard to say that learning more was bad. It's not that. It was that learning more made me consider more options, made me evaluate more problems that could happen. Like if I wouldn't have any training at all, if I was like here, if I would train a firefighter, you got 1 hour, I would say, fire, spray water, smoke, spray water. You would give a simple cues like triggers, and, and they would, because they can't handle more. You don't have time to train, they can't handle more. So giving more knowledge is you start to make more. You start to see more potential problems and potential possibilities, which again is a very big problem because you don't have that time to evaluate them. Now, to me, I realized that the biggest advantages I got from knowledge was in my own pre-planning. When I designed my own way of making decisions, because I'm a firm believer. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying I can make a pre-planned way of thinking for you. Like I can, of course, give you. This is how I look at a fire when I arrive. This is the sort of things I look at. This and this and this and this, and I take decisions. But it's dependent on whatever you know. Like if I were going to do a pre-plan, if I'm going to give like a checklist firefighting gig to a complete novice, it will look different. It would look different than I would give it to someone I know was highly knowledgeable about fire. Okay. They would have similarities, but it would be different. So when I made my own checklist about what do I actually have to, in my limited amount of time, what are the most important things to look at, to ask for, to check or verify, the knowledge was highly valuable in making those decisions pre-planned. But if we didn't do that pre-plan, that's what I thought when I hadn't done my homework, and I still am middle of doing homework because you're never done, of doing that evaluation of how do you think when you arrive. But before I did that, I became worse and worse because I had too many options, and I just backfired. I missed very obvious things I should have looked at and seen. I took poor decisions and so on. My communication was bad. So just to say, another tool in toolbox is always good. It's just completely, utterly false. Another tool in toolbox is very good if you have, again, very good, high amounts of knowledge, good experience, and a lot of time to analyze. And you don't have that. So I switch more and more towards where I say another tool in toolbox it's a potential problem. Like I would much rather be very good at one type of saw, like if I'm going to cut something in my house, than having 15 where I suck at all of those 15.
Do you think there's a breakover point, or does it really come down to how much training you do with the knowledges you have? Like, is it better to have 4 saws, or if you're well trained in those 4 saws, is that the breakover point type deal? Is it really come down to just training with your saws?
Well, I think there's definitely an upper limit, because the amount of training you can justify spending is always limited. But I would say this: there's a lot of crossovers. If you look at someone told me once that if you're gonna have a to-do list, anything more than 3 items on that list is a wishing list.
Okay, I like that. I like that.
It's not a to-do list, and it's very true. Like to be able to do something, you have to focus on one thing, and that's how the brain works also. If you're trying to focus on 15 things at the same time, the brain is going to go tilt. I look at it. I don't know. Have you played with Lego?
Oh yeah,
Lego bricks.
Me and my son used to put together Star Wars Legos, especially.
Yeah, and my son is 4 years now, so I'm really excited. I'm buying it's just tons of Lego. He's just too young to really understand it, but I'm building it up towards where we can play together. I love it. But anyway, like imagine yourself like looking at if you have a classic Lego box with mixed bricks. If you're not OCD like I am, you just start organizing the bricks.
No, you have to organize the bricks. That's the first step. Absolutely.
Yes. Otherwise, you're an idiot. Just leave it there.
We'll agree.
But anyway, when you have a mixed bag of Legos, if you're trying to search for all the Lego pieces at one time, you're not going to find anyone. You have to set your brain to look. And I'm look at like blue pieces of this, and then you'll find blue pieces of this. But you can't go like on a list here. You have your wishing list, and you go like, I'm going to find all of those pieces, and just randomly start looking. You're not going to find squat because the brain can't focus on so many things at the same time. So when you go arrive to fire, and you go like, okay, so I've learned about looking at inlets and outlets and air tracks, and I have to look at, is the door unlocked or not? Do there's signs of possible people in there? There's too many things. You can't look at so many things at the same time. It's impossible. It's basically impossible. So if you don't have a good thought about that, you're just going to do this, recognition, prime decision. You're just going to repeat the things you did the last time. And you're going to miss that, the fire was on the second floor. Oh, the fire was in the basement. Or the kid's bicycle was here. Or the bedroom was over there. You're going to miss that. I mean, all the things you look at a video afterwards, go like, how the fuck did you miss that?
Right. I get that.
That wasn't hard to see in a video when you saw it 5 times.
Yeah. So, and if I can put it into a nutshell, is it really just pre-planning is identifying your priorities beforehand? Is that kind of a good way of saying what you're trying to say, or no?
Yeah. You like number 3 comes up very often in terms of like how many things you can ball, and there's a lot of Americans also run with that, and it comes up in research a lot about cognitive functionality. Like if you have more than 2 or 3 options, you tend to go with the default one. Like if you have 15 tools and there's a default one, it might be traditional default one, it might be experienced. Pick the default one.
It might be the flavor of the month.
It might be flavor of the month, but there's a default one. Like if you go to the classic example of ketchup, like you have 15 brands of ketchup on the shelf, and you go like, I'm not very interested in ketchup. I'll just have the default one because it's so hard to make the decision. It takes too much energy to actually make a good decision. Nice. That's why communism always said you have to have 2 options to 3, not more. It was actually based on science. The communism had a great. The American philosophy of more choices is better. No, it's not. Actually, not for being happy. It's not.
Okay.
You have because more choices. If you have, we're going off sidetrack here, but if you have 15 choices, whatever choice you pick, you're gonna have a nagging feel back in your brain and say, I could have probably picked a better.
I could have done better.
I could have done better. So it doesn't matter that you're happy. It doesn't matter if your jeans you just bought are very nice jeans, but maybe there was a perfect pair of jeans out there. And it keeps nagging you. It's going to make your life miserable. And picking a spouse, whatever it might be. If you only had 2 options, 3 options, it's much easier to make that decision. Also, when you've done that decision, if the options are very distinctly different between themselves, you're going to be very happy with your choice and be a happier person. I'm not arguing for communism in that sense, but they had a point.
They had a point based on science. So your dating advice is pick 2 women and then pick one of them.
Pick 3. Date 3 very different women, and then pick one of them.
And choose one. Okay.
They have to be very different, so that when you make your choice, you have to be very sure that you pick the right one.
I like it. So there it is. Dating advice from Lars. Keys to a happy marriage.
Keys to happy marriage. Limited options. No, but to tie that back to the fire ground, I'm very firm that the more options you add to to your toolbox, the more problems you create. And you have to be very, 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 very restrictive in adding a tool. It has to be a very, very often unique ability. You can do something, for instance, like a tool. Like for this trigger, there's only one tool. There's only one option. There's not 5 options to do this. For this trigger, here we have this tool or this technique or this method.
Nice.
Now, because when you combine those, that is a big pile of stuff you still have.
Right.
Like if you see a fire blowing out the window and you should do a transitional attack, should you go with a booster line or should you go with a flat lay? And if the flat lay, what kind of size on the flat lay should you use? What kind of nozzle should you use? If you have those types of options, again, people are going to default to the default options, or they will be very slow and sloppy about doing their job.
Okay.
So just that, and that's where, but that goes again. If whoever makes that decision, if it's myself doing that decision for myself in the future, saying, if I see this scenario, I'm going to pick this tool. Boom! I've decided now. I don't have to decide on the fire ground. But if you're responsible in the fire service, if you're an instructor or you're some kind of chief and you're the same policy, you're the one who's making those decisions beforehand. And if you don't have the knowledge to evaluate all the options at that level, like if you're in a fire instructor and you don't understand all the tools, how in the world can you make that choice for anyone else?
No,
you have to make that choice, but you have to understand it. So for the firefighter or me, when I'm an instructor, I look at myself and I want to understand every tool and every method, everything, and choose one. But when I go out as a firefighter, I don't have that array of tools with me because I will suck. I will have my limited amount of pre-planned ideas or triggers or tools and methods, because anything more than that, and I will bog down into analysis paralysis or just being poor at the task level because I have too many tools to be good at the skills level, at a task level.
Not enough training to deliver on all of them.
Yeah. But that's still the easy part. That's still the easy part. Like if you add another hose layer or whatever it might be, the easy part is to practically move the hose or deploy the hose from a hose layer or whatever it might. That's the easy part. Not people don't even train on that, but that's the easy part. To pick the right, for instance, hose in the right circumstance, depending on the occupancy or the fire behavior or how many staffing you are or whatever it might be. That's very hard. That's the software.
I like it.
That's almost impossible at the level of the what's possible in reality in terms of the limited amount of training time you have available as a department. Then you start really going like, oh fuck no, we can't have that many options because we do not have enough training hours to even go close to where we need to go on the software side.
Oh, especially if you put in like a new attack package, a new hose lay, and you train on it that first week, and then you never touch it again until day of. And so, no, without a doubt. But
anyways, when you add that attack pack or whatever it might be, if you haven't decided in advance, like when are you supposed to use it? If you're just going to go, hey, this could be a good thing to use wherever you see fit, like right. that's a recipe for disaster. At best, people would have the skill to deploy it. At best. Yeah, but probably they're going to suck at deploying it, and they're going to use it in the wrong time in the wrong place. Which is, again, that's the hardest part. And I go like, we look at culture also. Like if I look at the American Fire Service and the culture differences, we go back to that one. What I do see as a result of culture is America has way more emphasis on skills-based training than, for instance, Sweden. It's almost the opposite. Very much, the lack of better words, theoretical or book smart training. Okay. Now, there's of course a happy medium. If you've never touched a fire pump and you're going to go out like, okay, I know I should start it. I know this is the right time to start it. This is the right place to start it. But I have no idea how to start it. That's not a good outcome. So I mean, so you have to have skills to throw a ladder and deploy a hose back and so on. But if you're only skills-based fire training, you're gonna fail. I would say even more miserably, because you're just gonna have people throwing ladders in every window, and nobody gonna like, do we really need ladders on every window? Is that the most priority task we have right now, or is it to deploy another host line, or is it to vent, or whatever it might be. You just be focused on, I'm going to do my skill right. If I do my skill right, I'm a good firefighter, which is highly not true. Like, that's the easy part of being a firefighter, even though, again, firefighters don't even train on that. Like, that could be, but that's the easy part. It's the cognitive part is still the hardest one.
Wow, and it's the hardest to manufacture. So,
yes,
absolutely, no doubt. Okay, so I love this so far. I always like to ask my guests if they have a book that they think firefighters should read. And so, Lars Axelsson, do you have a book that you think firefighters should be reading?
Well, usually I get a lot of questions about fire behavior, and still, I think that the best book for fire behavior to firefighters is Enclosure Fires, which is you can get as a free PDF book from MSB, which is a Swedish. Yeah, it's a government agency for firefighters.
Enclosure Fires.
Yeah, and it's written. It's probably written. I don't know. It's 15 or maybe 20 years now. It's still pretty good. It's written. It was so traditionally we went from the book we used before that on fire behavior was, in many sense, much better. Now that's not available in English, so you can't read that anyway. But that was really better because it was more written directly to a firefighter.
Okay.
The Enclosure Fire book was sort of the attempt of bridging the gap between the science and the experience and the firefighter lingo. So the Enclosure Fire is starting to taking what then, especially, and before that, was considered scientific terms like, flashover and heat release rate and so on, and trying to bring that into firefighter vocabulary. Like, because before that, firefighters go like, yeah, fire hot.
Yeah. Water put out hot.
Yeah. But so that was the first, like, how do you bring in scientific lingo? And I think it's very good for understanding a lot of the lingo. Now, to be fair, and a lot of things in that book are correct, but it's still the physics and chemistry, a lot of it. It's very little upon implementation. Like, how do you actually use that knowledge? And that's where I think where if you don't read anything else or look at anything else about how do you use that knowledge, what is the practical implementation of that, you're going to fail. And I think that's to be critical of the Swedish system. We changed from a very practical book to this Enclosure Fires, which is a theoretical books, but again, very good understanding. I think it's vital that firefighters understand it. But then we skipped sort of the practical fire behavior book where it said, like, spray water on it if it's hot.
Gotcha.
Like, what have I learned about the fire? Well, it's hot, spray water. If it's dark, like, maybe spray water also. Those connections are not in the book. Like, there's nothing about firefighting in that book. Really.
Gotcha.
So I think that understand that just knowing fire behavior and having a fire behavior program where you go into containers and so on, talks about physics and chemistry. If you don't have a very solid foundation into what are the outcome of understanding this, like, what should I do, then you're also setting up for failure. So read Enclosure Fires, but look into UL, which is much better at not only explaining like fire behavior. And I think Enclosure Fires could, if you read that before UL came along, it would give you a lot more from the UL studies, for instance, of understanding the physics and chemistry.
No, absolutely.
It would make a lot more sense. But what UL did very good in terms of doing science was they actually implemented the hands-on part, which is what do you do with this knowledge? All the conclusions they drew or that people drew from it, like what are the practical implications? And I think that has been my biggest failure up until fairly recently. I relied too heavily on other people to draw their own conclusions.
Instead of just explaining to them what the conclusion was?
Yes. And not it sounds very pompous, and it is. But you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of thinking to kind of connect the dots. Like I try to connect dots all the time. It's like an ongoing it's ongoing. Like, well, what does all mean? If I see a video on the YouTube, it adds to the bank of what the hell does it all mean? How do you do firefighting? Most people don't have the time or interest to do that. Like they are not interested in connecting the dots themselves. So if you only give them the foundations and you don't provide them with the default conclusion, like saying, this is not true always, like you all said, this is not true always. This is just sort of if you're in this situation, like this is sort of it seems like a fairly good option to pick.
That's a good default, if nothing else.
That's a good default. Yeah. That's sort of a good starting ground.
Sure.
If you're not giving that in terms of fire behavior, like if you see this smoke, you should do this. If you see this smoke, you should interpret like this. Then you're definitely heading for failure. And I think the Swedish system was very good at doing that, not providing conclusions and thinking people would figure it out themselves. I think that bite us in the ass.
Enclosure Fires. It's a free PDF. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody that's watching, but I'm pretty sure it's available on the Bro Drive if you have access to that. And Kyle Ramagus' Bro Drive. I'm pretty sure that is in there.
Yeah.
So
it's a free book. And I mean, it was part of 3 books that was standard in Swedish fire education. It was enclosure fires. It was water and other extinguishing media. It was fire ventilation. It was 3 books, but none of them told anything about how to do firefighting.
Gotcha. So you guys had to
that
came from the software.
Yeah, that was the problem. Nobody connected the dots. The book that connected the dots was scrapped.
Gotcha.
And
it's not in English. You said that's the one that's not in English?
No, those 3 all in English. I could do this for fire ventilation book, and Stefan Svensson, this guy, he wrote another edition. I don't know. It's updated, at least to understand it. Okay. Which was, I think, very needed because there was a lot of research done after that came out. But so that's probably a good book. I don't know. I haven't read the edition, but it's probably a well worth read. It's fire ventilation, it's water and other extinguishing media, and that's a very good book. But it's about water and how extinguishing media works and so on. That has flaws, I would say, but if you want to understand water and so on, I think it's a very good book also. So
good water behavior.
But again, yeah, sort of how does water work? You know, like why do flames go out? Like if you're going to read, you know, like thermal. Like what happens to the flame when it, you know, loses in temperature, and why does it go out? But free radicals, you know, starting to bond real structures and so on. And understanding those, you know, like what's the physics in chemistry doesn't give you anything in practical firefighting. But again, that knowledge is the foundation for making the decisions to draw your pre-planning. Like, why do I think a tool is good? I've used it many times and it works. And I go like, that's not a good answer. Like you do not have all the experience that you have to need. Like in every situation, every position, every fire you can go to. So you go like, okay, why do I justify having this tool? Just because someone else told me, or is it because I've really understood the physics of what it can and cannot do and so on? And then you make a decision, and then you simplify to the point where you think it's starting to get stupid. And that's where you back out a little bit and think, okay, but you have to do that.
Okay.
At least if you're an instructor or a nerd.
The fire, yeah. I say you started getting some chemistry and physics going on there. I started to see the fire nerd coming out.
Well, I mean, I try to. At my point also, you know, there's this possibility to go as deep as you want. Like if you want to, you know, look at you know, quantum physics. I mean, that relates to firefighting in terms of how to, you know, quarks works and so on. But you start to reach a level where it's very hard to draw the conclusion of like, where do I apply this?
Some practical application.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's very hard. So I'm not. There's many engineers that know way more than I do about bits and pieces. What I try to be very nerdy about is the map. Like, do I have enough physics, enough chemistry, enough videos I've seen on YouTube, talked to enough people, played around in my head using small scale things, going to fires? Like, how do I have the biggest amount of map I need to create that? Like how do you do firefighting?
Nice.
If you focus on anywhere of those pieces, you're going to fail, probably miserably. You have to have them all.
Connecting all the dots.
Yeah, connecting all the dots. Like again, you have to. So the more nerdy you get, the broader you should become. In terms of, and again, that goes out. Like you asked for a book and so on. I mean, the most valuable books you can probably read has nothing to do with the fire service. Like if you want to be good at water, you read a really good engineering book about sprinkler systems.
Wow.
Like they will teach you more about hydraulics and pressures and droplet sizes than any firefighting books you would need. Now, if you need about combustion process, you would need an internal combustion process for vehicles. You would learn way more about optimizing fuel relationship with oxygen and so on, and how the pressures work and understanding fire than you would from a fire book. If you want to learn about, like technical skills, there's probably like you learn way more from going mechanics class than you go into like a technical rescue class and so on. So the nerdier you get, the broader you should go. That's my definite answer. If you go just deep, like you just go deep and very narrow, you're definitely not going to be good. Just look at every scientist; they would be horrible firefighters.
Fair. It's fair.
Just horrible firefighters, most of them. I mean, there are exceptions, like most of the guys and girls at like UL, but they are very practitioner firefighters.
Right, very practitioner based scientists. Yes.
Yeah, but if you look at the traditional scientists, they're like, oh yeah, I can tell you everything about the combustion process. They would know everything about them, but they can't put it in a house. They have no idea how that combustion is going to work in a house.
Right.
And of course, I have no idea how to fight it. Like what's practically possible of doing. But if you want to understand that, and then you take another one and you go to carpenter to understand construction.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That's how I look at being nerdy. I look at, like, I want to read, psychoanalyst books about the human mind. I will tell you way more about like dynamics of fire station than
most leadership books. Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I love it. Dude, this is really good. Lars, on this weekly scrap, we have a thing called 5 questions for firefighters. So you're the first Swedish man to get these questions thrown at them. So are you ready for the 5 questions for firefighters?
Yes, I've heard them, but I forgot them. So, but shoot.
This is coming at you. The scores are arbitrary, and so here we go. Number 1. What's the number 1 issue facing the modern fire service?
That's a hard one. I think that, the one I don't like, automation.
Okay.
Simply because it's going to make a lot of firefighters unemployed, and it's going to make our job a lot less fun. Because automation in everything from drones doing our specific work to automation in how sprinkler systems work and how detection systems work and how suppression systems work, our job is going to be way less fun in 20 years. So that's the biggest problem, but that's not a real problem because it's, it's hard to argue that's not, like bad for society. But that's going to be a problem. But if you're going to say, like what's an internal, I would say, what's an internal problem?
Okay.
Like in our organization and so on, I think it's, at least in Sweden, it's the leadership culture that you can, I don't know what you call it, leadership culture that you sort of can, everyone can do everything. And it's not important. Nothing is really that hard. Come on, dummy. It's not that hard. You don't need to train. Everyone can do it. Just send Peter to do it. I think it's some kind of sickness. I don't know if the management philosophy has become so distant from understanding the actual work. I think, especially in Europe, I think it's more pronounced in Europe because a lot of our senior officers don't come from the fire service. They come from other pieces. So they might be a military coming in to run the fire service and so on. Because they only need management skills because they don't have to understand anything about the job. That's the philosophy.
Wow. No, that is, yeah. Did not know that.
Yeah, that's a big, yeah. So the fire service in Europe, that's not true for all. There's highly different. Europe is very diverse. But I think that's, at least from the Swedish context, definitely for sure a problem because when you don't understand, like brain surgery, if you don't understand something, it looks like sort of people understand what to do, and then it doesn't look, it doesn't, like if you sort of think that they can do something, like a brain surgeon, why do you need more training? Why do you need more stuff? Why can't everybody do it? Why can't we have Johnny here coming and do it, because he works, you know, like close by, and he can do it also. That fits the financial sheet. And I think that's a huge problem, because the management underestimates the risks and the possibilities where you can achieve. They sort of become happy if nobody dies and you know, the fire doesn't spread to the next building.
Fire goes out, everybody goes home. That's success.
Yeah, like exactly, and that's for sure not a success. But. So management, I said leadership is broad, but if I want to have to make it more specific, it's that leadership don't understand the problems of the job being done.
Nice, I like it.
I mean, there's so many problems I could point out.
Oh, again, it's a very, like you said, it's a broad question. You could drill down so many ways on that question. So.
That influences everything. And, you know, like if you don't get money to build a training facility because the fire chiefs don't think it's important, you know, like. So it controls everything.
Absolutely. Nice. Question 2. What is the thing you are most excited about for the future of firefighting?
Automation, which is true. I'm highly curious about how to use automation to do firefighting better. But at the same time, I want to do firefighting manually. Like, so this again thing with the I still want to have the firefighter sombrero and be cool, but I still want to be good at my job. And if I want to be good at my job, if I don't look at automation or robotization and technical solutions, I'm not doing my job right. Like, it's just you know, I don't like it. I don't want to be a drone operator.
Right.
I want to be a badass dragon slayer. I
want to be forcing doors, saving babies, and slaying dragons.
Yeah. But the reality is the automation is highly interesting, and the fire service, if the fire service wasn't so backwards in terms of adopting new technology, and if the public agencies wasn't so backwards, I would say, for instance, if fire service was private and was in more sense, I think that the automation would come a lot longer in fire departments. We would have much more sense or capability of drones, for instance. I mean, I don't see a problem why a drone can't be sent into a building now, sweep the entire floor plane, draw up a map, and see where the victims are way faster than a firefighter could if you just build a rugged drone, for instance.
Wow.
You have that. So there's multiple problems, of course, but automation is highly exciting. So I don't know. Maybe that's, you know, what I'm looking forward to. But I have two things. Training also. I think that training is just absolutely fascinating. Like, there's so much revolving training, better facilities, better structures, better philosophy, better understanding of fire behavior that goes into training, which in that case goes into, because one thing that hampers the development of new technology like drones is that the people that are coaching all the startups that do drones to come in don't have any idea what they're looking for. They want to be better at doing the same thing they've always done. Like, oh, build me a robot that can carry the stuff up the stairs, because that's how we do it. But if we carry stuff upstairs, if we can do that a little bit better, awesome. They don't go, build me something so I don't have to carry anything up the stairs and don't even be in the building in the first place. Just make a drone fix it. Nobody gives that job to a startup company, because the startup company doesn't know that's what you really want.
Right.
And the firefighters don't want that. They want something. How can I, you know, like, make me a badass interior firefighter, give me X-ray vision.
I agree. I like that. I like that plan. Yeah. Let's make that one happen.
They're not saying, hey, make me never have to go inside again.
Very nice.
That's not the job they're giving them. So it's going to take a long time, but I'm excited. I think that's fun. It's
good.
Another, yeah.
All right. Number 3.
But we better be clear. I don't want it.
I'm with you. Number 1 issue and what you're most excited about. 2 and 1. The number 3. The best rank or position to be in the fire service.
depends on what your goal is. If you want to affect change, you want to be the fire chief. That's just bottom line. But if your job, and I think if you want to, you know, if you think you have good ideas, like if you're a guy, I'm a badass search and rescue guy. If you're the fire chief, you can train anyone up to your standard as you see fit. You can dictate as much money as you like. But if the objective is to be internal, meaning I want to, you know, what position do I think it's the most fun on the fire ground? It would be something equivalent of a captain or a lieutenant, meaning, you know, first row officer. Meaning you are right where the stuff happens and you get to sort of dictate how that's going to happen. The most important position on the fire ground, also the hardest position on the fire ground, and I would say the most fun position on the fire ground.
All three wrapped into one. Company officer basically is what?
Yeah, company officer. You got basically you know 2-3 firefighters, five firefighters.
One apparatus type deal, yes.
Yeah, one apparatus. That's the best position
Love
for fire
it.
service.
It's a good answer. I like that answer.
Yeah.
And of course, you did
correct. Was it correct one?
Completely arbitrary.
I advanced to the next round.
Number 4. It's like, do you want to be a millionaire? Okay, so best advice you ever received?
Stop kicking in doors that are closed. There's plenty of open ones. It's what?
I say, I was going to ask for elaboration. Are you talking about physically actually kicking indoors, or is this figuratively?
No, figuratively. Well, it could be physically also. I mean, I remember one of my fire departments was a guy. I was not on shift, but it could have been me also. No problem. But they arrived to a fire and they was going to force the door, and it was a solid door, and they used crowbar and a sledgehammer, and basically the wall started cracking. It was a brick and mortar house, so the walls started cracking because they were applying so much force. They were not forcing it in a good way. So if you're a forcible entry person, you would go yeah. But anyway, the window just beside it was open, so it was just like all the time they spent on forcing the door. now, so there's plenty of doors open. Could also apply in a practical sense, but it's definitely literally. I mean, if you are anyone in fire service that has an interest, you're trying to affect changes. I mean, sure. It doesn't matter what position you're in. You're trying to, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to have better training, whatever it might be. And this is so true. Like you can spend 80% of your energy achieving 20% outcome, the 80-20 rule. I mean,
the Pareto, right?
And that's very common in terms of, because you see something and on your list, this is the most important one or the most fun one, whatever, and you try to achieve that. But if you take a step back, you look at, okay, so it's going to take me a shit ton of work, and the outcome is not very big, dramatic difference. Instead of me trying to fix these 3 things that are much easier to do, and the outcome would be much better in total. Maybe even people going to like, hey, great job, instead of going like punch in the face because they don't want it.
Right.
So like. Taking a step back, I'm not very good at this, so I'm just gonna throw stones in because when you think something should be fixed and you're a personality that wants to fix stuff, you tend to want to fix the biggest problem. Like if you go for the biggest problem, whatever your intellect says you should do.
Right.
But taking a step back and go like, okay, so these are all my things I could do. And the more I do this, the more I realize that there's so many things I would like to fix. So it's like if I just go back off on this one, I'm just going to run on these balls instead and these things. I had plenty to do.
Right.
And maybe people are happy and it's fun to go to work instead of just bashing my head in the wall and making enemies.
Right. I mean,
that's what you do.
Hitting all that friction and resistance and
that's what you do. I mean, there are points where you go like, yeah, I'm going to take this fight, but you have to be very selective. That's going to be worth it.
Sure.
Like what is important, like the helmet, like would I be a fire chief in the American Fire Service and the staff goes like, fuck you, don't take our helmets. I go like, fuck you, you're going to have European helmets or you're going to die. No, like I would probably fix a lot of other stuff. I would fix your stupid fire trucks. They're also very American, but they're still stupid because they're very inefficient, they're bulky, they're loud as fuck. You have to wear like ear buffs to even be able to talk in them. They're just 40 years behind a European fire truck in pretty much everything besides capability of pushing water. But that's you can put that pump in the European also. Like that could be a better one. Oh, there's multiple issues, but that would be also very culturally problematic. So we're gonna.
I like this.
Put a
no, I'm gonna have you back no matter what. You're coming back because we're gonna discuss fire trucks and apparatus at some point.
You go like the engineer has 40 dials, and in Sweden it's just one button on, pressure up, pressure down. Like there's nothing else. You can't do anything else.
You can't take away the cool factor.
Well, you can. I mean, well, it depends. About the point, like depending on that station and that culture, is for instance, style of apparatus very important for the people. Like, is it worth the fight? Is it possible to meet halfway? Like, throw in European technology into a visually appealing package of the American fire truck. I'm not arguing that American fire trucks look bad. I think they look awesome. But again, like, where do you put your effort?
Right. That's a good point. I will save the rabbit hole of the apparatus because there's so many questions I want to ask. But I'll save that rabbit hole for the next volume.
Yeah.
Lars Axelsson on the Scrap Volume 2. But I will move on to question 5. And this is the final question. It's heavy fire and tenable space. Would you rather be assigned to the nozzle or first in on VES?
Oh, it's too limited amount of information, and it depends on like I would generally say, I want to be at the nozzle. That's like Andrew Fredericks. If you put the fire out, mostly things go better, which is a true statement. Like it's in most cases a true statement. Now, do I miss in Sweden? We are not by law. We can't search for the hose line. It goes back many years.
Okay.
So we don't have a typical search team. Like we have, people with hose lines that do either search or fire attack.
Okay.
Or both, depending on whatever the situation is. But would I myself want to be, if I'm searching, do I want to have a hose line? Probably not. Like that would be a very serious, it would slow me down a lot to search with a hose line, of course. But if you ask the other question, would I have the average firefighter be without a hose line? Yeah, because the average firefighter is not the ace of spades. So, what is most fun then? I have to be go fun. Yeah, fire attack is way more fun.
Fire attack's where you want to be. Okay.
Yeah, I want to be. I'm a hose monkey.
Fire nerd hose monkey. I love it. That's the 5 questions for firefighters as answered by Lars Axelsson. Sir, you got max points. Of course, they're arbitrary. Yeah. Everybody gets max points.
Yeah, you're a communist, so everyone gets this. Everybody gets a trophy.
Everybody gets.
Everybody gets a trophy.
And the first place
American.
I've actually gotten a little more picky lately. The more unique answers are getting more and more discussion on them, and so I definitely am going to come back to the apparatus question. But Jack Wilson chimed in and said, Lars' ability to translate to both the European and American fire services ideals are on point. I appreciate how he explains the issues. Solid advice right there from Brian Bastinelli, which I believe you had him on not long ago. Did you not? Maybe it's a similar name. Bastinelli? Maybe I'm wrong.
No.
Sorry, Brian. And other people saying on point again. Lots of good supportive comments. So
nobody comments at the beard.
I'll wait and see. I'm a fan.
The first when I started coming to the United States, it was the most important question. Nobody was interested. Oh, absolutely. Nobody was interested in booster lines or anything else. It was just like, how can you have a beard? You're not a real firefighter. And when I started becoming on Facebook and started,
I saw you with the one on Facebook where you're pointing at the picture saying,
yeah, that was in Spain. In some places in Spain you can have a beard, but some places no. No, it was in France. Sorry, in France you cannot have a beard. Definitely not. So when I went to America, I got a lot of not a lot. That was a fair amount of messages that go on like, fuck you, you're not a real firefighter, get the fuck out of here. solely because I had a beard. And I said, if you have a beard, you can't be a firefighter. So you're a poser, and you know, fuck you. And that was this sorry, it becomes less and less and less, but it's still a lot of people that go at first and like, no, you're not a firefighter. You can't be because you have a beard. And in America, I still can't do live fire training in a lot of states simply because I have a beard.
Wow. But
I'm still fit tested. I'm fit tested in California with flying colors, and I'm fit tested in is it Colorado? Or is it? So I've had 2 fit tests in America, and I passed both in the flying colors.
With the full beard.
With the full beard.
There you go. That's a.
But it doesn't matter, because in some places it doesn't matter if I'm fit tested, I can't and pass it. I still can't do burns. You can't burn, shave it, or you're not going inside. Wow. Yeah, so there's a lot of places that are, you know, like really rigid on it, and some places in America you go like, we don't care. Okay. you can do whatever you like. You know, like, here's a fire truck. I remember doing ride-alongs in America, and when they first asked me, like, hey, you want to come in? And I was like, what the fuck? Can I do that? Like, sure.
Does that not exist?
Well, like, you can do that in Sweden. You would like to be like, you would have to be employed. You have to be trained by that department. You have to be like, you can't just take a random dude like, you look like a firefighter. Come on in.
Really? Okay.
Oh, you cannot do that. So I was like, holy shit, you can go inside. Now that was different too. Some places you go like, you have to stay with command. You can't move. Like, you can't move 5 inches from command, or we'll. Okay. Yeah. But some places go like, yeah, sure, you know, like, have an SBA, like, don't do anything stupid. You know, like, I'll try not to.
Right. No, I can only imagine the safety, the liability. Commandos would be through the roof on that. So I can. Oh yeah.
Well, if I were the fire chief, I would not take random dude and just go like, yeah, sure, hop on in. I do not see how this could end up badly.
An international fire behavior instructor, I would say is a little different category of someone to take interior, but that's just me.
Well, I mean, now on that level, but it's still like formal level. And but when I started traveling, I mean, nobody knew who I was then.
That's true.
I was like a nobody. I was just somebody who was referred to by somebody else who said, "Hey, this dude wanted to come. You know, like, do you have a spot?" Like, yeah, sure, you can ride our engine.
Nice, nice.
No,
that's awesome, Lars. I cannot tell you enough to say thank you for taking. I believe it's your evening there. And spending the time.
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock at night.
Okay, well, I won't keep you much longer. It's only 3:40 in the afternoon where I'm at. So
I'm a night person. I will be up for many more hours.
Oh, okay. Well, then, yeah, you did mention you liked your mornings.
Yeah, mornings. Mornings are awful. Brunch is where I start living.
Okay, I like that.
In the border between lunch and morning. That's where I go up.
Well, the next time you get to the States and you get to the Midwest and you come to Oklahoma, we will have brunch. And I will make sure to meet you in person. If I do make it over there, I will try and look you up, because I have had an immensely good time with this conversation. I want you to come back in the future, and because I think we just scratched the surface of everything that's going on beneath that beard, underneath that, in that brain. So
there's a lot. I mean, I think we're interesting times. I mean, someone asked me, I don't know if, don't know, you know, where do you see the American and the European fire service going? And I said, I think we're in an interesting time. Like, I see that the European fire service has been traditionally more understanding about fire behavior and using techniques like anti-ventilation until you do ventilation, more restrictive. And America has been more oriented towards, of course, research and early ventilation, and then you have the stream practice where Europe is gone and fog, and that's the discussion for the next one, and straight stream. And I think that we're looking at a very much of a merging between broad pencil strokes, the European and the American fire service, into something that's going to be very interesting. Right about the time where drones going to take over, we're going to have a really good firefighters.
Right about the time the drones take over, right about the time European helmets start popping up all over America.
You don't need them anymore, because the drones is going to do it.
The drones will be doing it. But you could put a sombrero, like the drone has a little sombrero.
Yeah, well, I mean,
as an homage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, if it serves no purpose as protection, the American style helmet is excellent. So use it as a bumper sticker on the
nice.
on the
Get
drone.
the dig in. Get the dig in.
That's good.
Thank you,
Nice
sir,
talking
so
to you,
much
Carter.
for joining us. For everybody who commented, asked questions, and joined us, thank you guys so much. I hope the tone stays silent unless it is burning. Stay safe out there, and thank you, Lars, for joining us.
Goodbye.